The cubs were terrified of everyone except the human. No one could explain why Dr. Zelthara's 4 arms trembled as she approached the containment unit for the 3rd time that cycle. The Catherian xenobiologist had studied countless species across 17 sectors of the galaxy, but nothing had prepared her for the creatures they'd rescued from the dying world of Nexus 7. The cubs, as the human had insisted on calling them, were unlike anything in the galactic database. Standing barely a meter tall, they possessed midnight black fur that seemed to absorb light itself, 6 legs ending in retractable claws that could slice through reinforced steel, and eyes that glowed with an inner fire that spoke of predatory intelligence far beyond their apparent age. Their telepathic abilities were so potent that they had already driven 3 researchers to temporary madness with their fear-induced psychic screams. But it wasn't their physical capabilities that terrified the research team. It was their behavior. The moment any non-human approached their enclosure, the cubs would huddle together in the far corner, their psychic wails of terror echoing through the minds of everyone within a 50-meter radius. Dr. Corvin, the station's Altarian psychologist, had collapsed during his first attempt at contact, blood streaming from his sensory organs as the cub's panic overwhelmed his mental defenses. Even Commander Vextar, a battle-hardened draconian veteran of the Rim Wars, couldn't approach within 10 meters without the creatures reducing themselves to quivering shadows. Everyone, that is, except for Lieutenant Sarah Chen. The human researcher, barely into her 3rd decade and possessing no special qualifications in xenobiology, could walk right up to the enclosure, and the cubs would immediately calm. They would approach the barrier, their glowing eyes fixed on her with what could only be described as adoration, their psychic emanations shifting from terror to something resembling contentment. "It makes no sense," Dr. Zelthara muttered to her research partner, Dr. Cross, a crystalline being whose species had mastered empathic communication eons before humans had discovered fire. "Every biological indicator suggests these creatures should view humans as the greatest threat. Your species are natural predators, apex hunters from a death world that shouldn't have produced sentient life." Dr. Cross's crystalline form flickered with patterns of confusion. The cubs' psychic signature indicates they recognize humans as something familiar, yet their homeworld had no contact with Earth. It's as if they're responding to something deeper than mere appearance. Through the observation window, they watched Lieutenant Chen sitting cross-legged before the enclosure, speaking softly to the cubs in that peculiar human way of communicating with young creatures. The cubs pressed themselves against the barrier, their telepathic purring creating a warm, soothing sensation that filled the observation room, a stark contrast to their usual psychic screams. "I've run every scan possible," Chen had explained earlier, her voice carrying that typical human mixture of curiosity and stubborn determination. "Biosignatures, pheromone analysis, electromagnetic readings, nothing that should make me different from the rest of you, but they know something we don't." Commander Vexistar, his reptilian features scarred from countless battles, had initially dismissed Chen's connection as coincidence. But as cycles passed and the pattern remained consistent, even he had to acknowledge the inexplicable bond. "In my 3 centuries of military service," he had told the research team, "I've learned to trust patterns, even when they defy explanation. These creatures see something in humans that we cannot detect." The breakthrough came when Dr. Zelthara decided to analyze the cub's homeworld more thoroughly. Nexus 7 had been a harsh world, torn apart by seismic activity and radiation storms that had driven its ecosystem to the brink of extinction. The cubs were the sole survivors of their species, rescued by a deep space exploration vessel just days before their world finally tore itself apart. But hidden in the geological survey, data was a revelation that changed everything. Nexus 7's fossil record showed evidence of another species, bipedal, tool-using, and remarkably similar in bone structure to early humans. These ancient beings had coexisted with the cub's ancestors for millions of years before vanishing from the fossil record approximately 50,000 years ago. They were the cub's caretakers, Dr. Cross realized, his crystalline form pulsing with excitement. A proto-human species that somehow reached Nexus 7 eons before Earth humans achieved spaceflight. The implications were staggering. Somehow, through the vast expanse of time and space, an evolutionary cousin of humanity had found its way to a distant world and formed a symbiotic relationship with the cub's species. The cub's genetic memory, their very DNA, carried the imprint of that ancient bond. Lieutenant Chen, when presented with the findings, simply nodded as if she had always known. "They remember us," she said simply, reaching through the now open enclosure to gently stroke one of the cubs, its purring intensifying. "Not humans exactly, but what we used to be, what we could have been." Dr. Zelthara watched in amazement, as the cubs, no longer confined but choosing to stay close to Chen, began to explore their new environment with confidence. Their psychic emanations had shifted completely, no longer the wild, terrified broadcasts that had driven the research team to distraction, but complex, curious thoughts that spoke of intelligence eager to learn and grow. "Humans, Commander Ray," Vextar observed, a note of something approaching reverence in his voice, "are perhaps the only species in known space that carries the genetic memory of every world you've never been to. Every creature you've never met recognizes something ancient. In you, the echo of bonds formed before your civilization even existed." As the research station resumed its normal operations, now with 6 small shadows following Lieutenant Chen through the corridors, the galactic community was forced to reconsider their understanding of humanity's place in the universe. These strange, short-lived creatures from a death world didn't just adapt to the galaxy. In some inexplicable way, the galaxy had been waiting for them to return. The cubs had found their guardians again, just as they had millions of years ago on a world that no longer existed. And in doing so, they had revealed a truth that no amount of scientific study could have uncovered, that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their adaptability or their resilience, but their ability to form bonds that transcended space, time, and even extinction itself. In the end, no one could explain why the cubs trusted humans above all others. But perhaps, Dr. Zelthara reflected, some connections didn't need explanation. They simply needed to be honored.